Greatness Podcast with Jason and Jolene.
Welcome back to the Into Greatness Podcast with Jason and Jolene. I am Jason.
And I'm Jolene.
Jolene, how's your morning been?
I was thinking about it on the way here. I was like, fuck. We're talking about routines and ruts. And I was like, I would love to have my own self-defined routine.
Right?
And Jason looked at me compassionately and was like, it'll come, Jolene. It'll come. Yeah.
It's the first years of children, it doesn't exist because children have no routine. And they got to get to about 8 or 9, 10 even, I found, before you really get that back.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. We have routine in my house that is revolved around them. They require routine. When you have that many individuals and one adult, routine's key for us, right? Yeah. And then that allows us to be flexible when we need to go outside of that. So I was like that as like a new mom. Mm-hmm. Sleep and food and all of that stuff, the routine, the same bed, all that stuff was like big for me. But my own personal routine, the things I am doing and what my days look like are not my chosen routine. They're what's left over.
Yeah.
They're what I can fit in where it's necessity. And that's something we'll talk about today in terms of the difference between males and females in terms of masculine and feminine energy. Not totally gender specific there, guys, but I will talk about it as men and women type thing. Use your imagination to expand that. But we'll talk about the differences of why we have different needs for different routines, quote unquote.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And when those routines can become a rut and you kind of start to stagnate, because that is possible. Mm-hmm. That is the danger of routine. Like I live being dyslexic and having a really hard time in school. I created, at the time they called it systems.
Yeah.
In order to succeed. But they were routines, mm-hmm. right? They were kind of like, get your work done as soon as you get home. And when it's still, all the lessons are fresh in your mind, just sort of a pattern that it would sort of work for me in my head so that I could connect those dots that wouldn't just naturally connect and still don't connect. I have to kind of still keep a pretty strict routine, but you can become a slave to that routine mm-hmm. at the same time when you're applying it to everything you do in life.
Yeah. And there's a part of us that needs routine means predictability, which means less decisions need to be made, which means there's more safety. There's more, a lot of people will feel calmer with that, right? Mm-hmm. It makes me think of the idea that people who have high anxiety might rewatch like sitcoms and movies over and over again because they know the outcome, and it's like it's not super activating for them anymore.
No stress.
No stress. Yeah. So if you already know what you're doing and things are pretty predictable, that creates less stress, right? There's less unknowns, but we also thrive on that unknown adrenaline kick, excitement kick. So it's this delicate balance of both of those things. And if you're 80% routine, 20% spontaneous, I think that's a nice little blend. Isn't there a book, 80-20 or something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, I think, so looking at those kinds of things. Now, what we'll highlight is the differences. So masculine energy, we've talked about this probably in the battle of the genders, tango of the genders, whatever. The differences between the two ways say Jason and I operate. So masculine energy operates on a 24-hour cycle. That is the sun in the sky. It goes up and down on a 24-hour basis. You guys wake up, have like peak energy, and then it starts to drop later in the day. You recoup overnight and boom, you're back up. Women, like feminine energy, syncs with the moon, which is a 28-day cycle. So we have 1 week that's starting to climb the hill all the way to the top. About 2 weeks in is like typically our ovulation type time. But what that means is put us on stage, right? Give us, that is our time to like find the buck in the woods, right? So that's when we are most productive, most inspired, most outward energy. Estrogen levels are high. So you imagine that from like the first of the month, that's around like the 13th to the 15th of the month. And then we spend 2 weeks rolling down a motherfucking hill, hating the fact that we feel worse every day that we wake up until we bleed. And that is regardless of whether we have a bleed cycle. That is what our bodies are synced to. So whether you're a young woman, whether you're an older woman that's like postmenopausal, you are still going to cycle energetically the same way. So we have really productive times. And when we can book our own schedules and be productive during those times and rest in the rest times where we're supposed to actually go introverted and have, even change our food. So we are supposed to eat differently depending on where we're at in our cycle. we can be just as productive as if we were burning it 24 hours a day. But because we live in this like Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, we are expected to have the same amount of energy every day, even though our 28-day cycle doesn't actually allow that. So that's why some weeks are harder than others. Some we get really, really productive and we're like, whoa, that was easy. I did all this stuff. And then like, I cannot bring myself to do this. I help university students with this because it impacts their paper writing. They're like, I cannot, I'm so blocked. And I'm like, where are you at in your cycle? What's happening? And there's so many impacts like that. And it's taken me years to hack into this for myself and understand it. But that is something really important to understand in terms of routine, because if our routine mimics that 24-hour every day you do the same thing, or you have this, you're actually fighting against what the natural need of your body is, and you feel it seasonally.
Yes, seasonally, definitely.
Yeah,
definitely.
Not as much daily. Like you may feel it daily from a Monday to Friday. You might feel it down in later in the week. You need to be more restorative or something. But for the most part, you're doing it on a 24-hour clock. Women do it on a monthly clock. We get like 4 different distinct weeks, and we do that for 12 months of the year.
Crazy.
Right?
And
Isn't that wild?
That's never like talked about.
No,
in
because we didn't understand
or
it.
anything, right?
And honestly, like it was just in the last 5 years that I really started anchoring in. So for the women out there, Kate Northrup's book, like she has this egg wisdom. Her mom was a gynecologist, and she plans her business all around the wisdom of the egg. And essentially, the egg only comes out one day of the month and says, hello, come find me. It doesn't chase anything around. It comes, it does its thing. If something finds it, being the sperm, it will do its thing. Other than that, like it will go, it'll stay in hiding, it'll do its thing, right? So if we allowed our energy to do that and followed the wisdom of the egg, we can optimize at every stage of our cycle. Like if we're working at 100% capacity during our rest time, what's going to happen when we're in our active time? We've already burned up the fuel.
Yeah,
we don't
totally.
have anything stored. We haven't properly restored when we could, and we can't maximize on that. So there is this delicate balance of being aware of that, probably not being able to do anything about it. But what I will tell people is like, you can't change your job necessarily. You can't change the demands of your kids. That's where I am right now. My schedule and routine is entirely, up to other people essentially, but you can change what you do. So are you doing a rigorous gym activity during your restorative part of your cycle? No, do yin yoga. So still do your activity, but change what you're demanding of your body. What are you inputting, right? Are you having enough fats during certain times of your cycle? Well, if you're on a really rigid nutrition routine and you don't realize you need more fats during that time, you can actually not optimize the performance of your body at that time. And you can be moodier and you can retain more water, like all the things. So it's about really understanding what's happening at that biological level. Make sense?
Hugely.
Yeah.
Hugely.
Yeah. And then we look at the lifespan, and it's like, where are you at different stages of your life? What your body needs right now, Jason, is so different than before. So your routine even looks different than before, right?
Oh, yeah. It's definitely like changed over the years. And that's something that I'm struggling with right now, is just getting used to. Because I have sort of the balance of, yes, I do not recover as quickly. So I'm doing more yoga than hardcore activities, but I still crave, like I started doing boot camp twice a week.
Yeah.
Because I still need that. And sort of for my mental health, I need that exertion, like where you're taking a sledgehammer and you're hitting a tire.
Yeah.
Like that just feels so good.
Yeah.
But when I did it last Friday morning, I didn't start to feel recovered until Monday morning. Like it took all that time, right? Like it just took a lot longer.
Mm-hmm.
And definitely I like writing. I need to write in the morning. Like I used to be able to write anytime. The newspaper, I could write at 10 o'clock at night and all that. But now it's like if I don't write between like 9 and noon, it gets hard. Like it gets really hard for me just to focus and do that now.
Interesting. Your brain's fatigued. You, I think, probably pile more things onto your brain. It's probably fresher and less tainted in the morning.
In the morning,
right?
Yeah.
After you've been well rested. And yeah, that's really interesting. So different things, looking at routine, like what is the importance of it? What does it do? I always think of the idea of habit stacking, right? So start with one small thing that you can anchor into and build on top of that, right? And that's going to change and it's going to adjust depending on what all those things are. But, connect with your why. Like, why is this important to me? Because all too often we do things or we commit to things and then it's like, oh, but it's really hard. I don't know why I can't do that. Or, I have this gym membership, but I'm not using it. And I'm like, well, it's probably not important.
Yeah, to you. Like,
right?
Someone's told you it's important,
like, do you know
or
how
you
many
should?
people pay for gym memberships and don't use them?
Lots.
Like, why? Because what's that doing to your psyche? It's reminding you that you're not following through. It's reminding you it's not important. And it immediately devalues it to you. Like, put it on pause. So I was just telling Jason that I have to keep canceling some of my Pilates classes because of sick kids lately. And I'm like, man, I just feel like maybe I should put my membership on pause because I hate not using it as much as I want to for how much it costs me. And that really makes me start to feel resentful and conflicted. Mm-hmm. And then I feel ripped off that I mean, of course I'm going to be home for my sick kids, but then I start to feel ripped off of that activity. So if during some of this like high time of demand and maybe I have to put it on pause so I don't have those conflicting feelings. When I restart it, I'll have that renewed energy and excitement for it because I have the excitement and then it gets stolen away from me, right?
Yep.
So I'm always juggling my response to those things and how it impacts my perception of the activity I get to choose for myself, which is that one, right? So if you were to look at like what things do you commit to in your life that you kind of half-ass and you are giving yourself conflicting messages, right? Like, are you saying you're sticking to a strict bedtime routine? That's a big one I struggle with, mm-hmm. right? But then you do all these things to counter that, right? But yeah, that gym membership one is huge.
It's huge for a lot of people. I mean, I get it. Like, people are like, oh, I need to get in shape. I need to be healthy. And as you get older, you should be healthy. You need to put more effort into strength building and flexibility and all this stuff. Then
discipline yourself.
Yes, and then discipline yourself. And but I think, no, like I am huge on discipline. But it's sometimes when you over-discipline, that's when you hit the rut.
Yeah.
Because you're doing it just on the sheer force of will, and willpower eventually does run dry.
Yeah, and that's a tricky one, hey, Jay, because there's sometimes that we have to fake it till we make it just to get into the routine of something, just to be able to push through. And it's like, when are you pushing through and doing the work in a positive way? And when are you pushing through and not listening to yourself? Yeah. And essentially that then becomes like the manifestation of self-abandonment. And then you're sitting in that place of self-abandonment all the time. I'm doing this thing I don't actually want to be doing.
Yeah. Even though you know it's the right thing to do, but you've gone past the point of no return in terms of physically or mentally being able to do it anymore.
Yeah.
And I think the same can be applied to some relationships we have in our lives too, right? Like hugely. I think it's a universal human condition of what
totally,
we do.
Right?
Yeah.
We can do this in like complacency in a lot of different places, right? So, it's interesting. Most of the time we don't recognize the value of our routine until it's taken from us, until we don't have opportunity for it. You probably reflected a lot on that when you swapped careers in the summertime, mm-hmm. because all of the routine, I'm pointing to this room of like your writing and things like that, got hijacked by what that new routine was.
Yeah, which was get up really early, go to work really early, work your ass off hard all day, come home, be too tired to do much of anything else.
Yeah, right? Yeah, and like Jason was just saying that, him and Jess wake up around 7-ish, and I was like, oh my God, rub it in, right? So thinking about some of those things. And then you even said, once Griffin's old enough to get himself up, like you're going to change that routine too. Probably sleep in more, whatever your body needs.
Why not?
Yeah. And there's so much luxury you have in being able to create your own schedules. And again, I know not everybody has the opportunity to do that. And I think it's about what areas of our lives are we forced to do certain things just because they are important to us. We're forced to do them maybe at times and locations that aren't ideal for us, but we make it work. And how do we protect those in terms of making almost like a little agreement to ourselves to say, I'm doing it like this, but it's not going to be like this forever.
Yeah.
And that really helps resolve any resentment and kind of distaste for that activity or whatever it is. Like, I really wish I could be going to the gym, but I have to do it at home, or I have to do it. I remember seeing some people do it at the arena when their kids were there, practicing or whatever. So finding the time and place, it's not ideal, but it's important enough to me that I will find where it fits right now. Or do you write it off altogether, right? Like, again, what message are you sending yourself when you allow yourself to make exceptions to these things? And it does not take long to follow a routine. They say that it takes 3 weeks to build a habit. Yeah. And 3 days, a long weekend, to break it.
Yeah, and that's true. I mean, there's some wiggle room there for depending on the person, but that's kind of the norm.
Yeah. That's why fitness programs, writing programs, all different things have like 28 day, 20 or 21 to 28 day sort of burst programs, right?
Same, the Daily Stoic had the New Year, New You challenge, and it was 30 days.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, that's why my workshop is 4 weeks,
Yeah.
right? Because for women, I want to get them through every stage of their cycle.
Yeah, that's
and
perfect.
every stage of the moon. And I actually book it around the moon cycle so that we can witness, observe, and maximize on that energy that comes through.
Yeah, which is good. That's smart.
Yeah.
That's just, 'cause
Yeah.
especially for, like you say,
Are you
for
calling
women.
me smart?
I am calling you smart.
Sweet.
You're very welcome.
You guys get that?
Yeah.
So, okay, for you, Jason,
Yeah.
what are routines you have struggled with? What are ones that were like really amazing before? Which ones do you miss having? Let's like do the spectrum.
All right. So my current routine is kind of like get up at 7, help get Griffin up. Although he's getting pretty good. He's waking
Yep.
up now. So we kind of get up, do our thing, like the breakfast. He gets out the door, meets his friends. I go shower, and then Jess goes shower, and then I come down and I get to work. I start
Yep.
writing because I need to get that done. Or in the case like today, we record. And that I work generally until like 11-ish, and then sort of take a break and eat. And then I sort of do like the light or easier stuff after.
Mm-hmm.
And my work, quote unquote, work day is usually done by 2.
Wow, nice.
Right? And then I get to kind of chill out in the afternoon until Griffin comes home. Although now he quite often goes to friends after. You know what I mean? So sometimes
Yeah.
Jess and I get some time to do stuff depending on what she's doing. Or I just do whatever. Go
Yeah.
out and run some errands, hang out.
Yeah.
And then we do dinner. Jess and I make dinner together starting about 4:30 on average.
You guys have such a healthy dynamic to be able to foster good connection because that is so unique in Western culture here.
Oh, yeah.
How many people get to cook dinner together at 4:30?
Very few.
Or go for a walk at 3:00, right?
Very few, right?
You guys have done so well with that.
That's probably why we're still standing.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like-
Honestly, that's why there's a lot of harmony between the two of you. There's really not a lot of bones of contention or things where like, yeah, either one of you get extremely stressed because like the fire never actually starts to blaze. Like
Yeah.
there's space, there's time.
Yeah, which is, I think, is too bad. Like everyone can't, but I understand. It was a lot different when I was at the paper.
Oh, fuck.
And she was at like Bridgeport Floors, right? Like it was but there's no child, so it took the edge off. But I remember then, Jesus, I was at work by 8:30, and there were days I wasn't home till 7 at night.
Exactly.
Right? It was very different.
And because of that, I think you two appreciate this a lot more too,
Yeah.
right? She feels your presence. She's not on her own with certain things. You have ability to have like, you can reach out to her or you
yeah.
can do your own thing, right?
Yeah,
like even to just see each other in passing is like huge these days.
Oh, huge, right?
Yeah.
And then I do the laundry and
Yep.
she does some of the cleaning and we just kind of work those chores back
Yeah.
and forth. So that's kind of our current routine. And then weekends, well, if I'm not off filming or
Yep.
hunting Sasquatch, it's kind of just a down weekend. We keep our weekends pretty free, right?
Yeah, that's amazing. So think about like your paper when you were on that routine, like your whole household changes because when you're gone for that period of time, it completely changed Jess's routine or
Oh, yeah.
whatever, right?
It was very different. And I mean, there'd be days, especially if I, covered a murder or an accident where you don't come home in a good mental
Yeah.
place either. And so like, I mean, that's like more than 10 years ago now. But I'd say it was a lot more tumultuous.
Yeah.
And I was a lot angrier.
Yeah.
As a human being,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And that's the other thing. What is the benefit of all these things and why do you anchor into caring for yourself more? Because you know what it was like when you didn't feel well. You know how
Yeah.
it impacted your house, how it impacted you. And when you're at a place where your career is based on creativity, free flow of thoughts, inspiration, you can't be bogged down. Like
No.
I know that for myself is like I have these grand ideas of programs I want to roll out and I'm so bogged down. I'm just so demanded in different areas. My workload is full at work, but my house load is full everywhere, everything. So for me, like I miss having routine pre-kids where I would go to bed at a decent time. Like I was doing my master's and working full time at the time, but still was able to get to bed by like 10:30, right? Now it's like midnight. I'd wake up at 5:30 and go walk the dog. And that was my favorite routine, right? And all that got hijacked once I did it while I was on mat leave with Marsh, but once I went back to work, there just wasn't enough time to fit all of that in. So I had to do it after work. And I really miss having a dog and not having that routine because it's easy to now put that to the side and, not prioritize a structured experience like that every day, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's sort of
We're still outside playing, but it's not a bonding time that we used to have in the backfield with the dog. You know?
exactly,
Yeah.
right. And for you to walk the dog like in the morning, that's almost, even though you're physically moving,
Oh,
it's a
fuck,
moment
I
of stillness.
loved
It's a
it.
moment
I
of
loved
stillness.
it.
It's quiet, right? You get
Yeah.
to take out in the world around you.
I
Like the
loved
dog's
it.
not like chatting your ear off about whatever, right? Like
there was always a couple people I'd run into at one spot at like the school field, and we'd talk, and but yeah, I would spend an hour walking her around the neighborhood, and throughout the season I would then get to see like people's flowers growing. I'd watch the gardens grow, then I'd watch the leaves fall. I loved watching that. I loved the time when all the flowers were coming up, or then when the Christmas lights came out, or the decorations. Like every day the walk would evolve in a different way on the season, right? But like those are different pieces of routine that I would have before. And when I was doing my schooling, I had my own routine of coming home, cooking dinner, being in my office till 10 o'clock at night. And that was my routine, so I could free up things on the weekend to have pleasure for myself, right? Now my routine is very much like every day. It's routine from Monday to Friday, but every day is very different. I'll work in the morning, pick up my kids. Like we got lots of ice times. Marshall decided to play volleyball, which is 3 days a week after school as well on top of those. So every single day is based around that. But then also my billet schedule too, and what I need to have ready for meals, and whether I cook that in the morning or whether I cook, like there is probably 14 meals I make before I leave my house every day, because I need 4 lunches for us. And then we need 4 after school snacks, and then sometimes dinners. Like it's fucked, Jason. So then you look at the dishes just from that.
Oh yeah.
So then I'm also unloading the dishwasher in the morning while I'm making breakfast and lunches and afternoon snacks at the same time. And then somebody wants their ponytail redone like 7 times. But like I keep thinking, like, is there a way I can wake up earlier? Because I'm already up 2.5 hours before I leave the house, and there's not enough time to do it all.
That's crazy.
It's fucked.
It is. I can remember going to work and getting up with Griffin at like 5:30, because he was an early riser kid, still technically is, but it would just be like the same thing. Like, that's like, I wasn't leaving until 8.
Yeah.
But 2.5 hours, 3 hours wasn't enough.
No.
To get ready for the day.
Yeah, it's wild, right? So, and again, I also have the luxury of not working a 9 to 5, and this is why I can fit all these things in, right? But like I clean toilets while my kids are in the bathtub. Like I'm juggling all those things all the time, right? To free up things. And, it's hard because with Kevin, we don't get to see each other all day. So then I try and get my kids to bed, which is also a struggle. And then he goes to bed early. So I'm always trying to catch him on FaceTime, and then that eats up our night. But it's my priority connection because I need something, right? And so does he, right? So those are all the things that then you're trying to fit in amongst all of that, right? To get it done. Whereas before I used to probably just putter until 11 o'clock and do a bunch of that stuff. But I'd like to sit down and actually give him my time and attention during that time, right?
Even for like a half hour to an hour, right?
Yeah, and it never feels like enough because we barely get to cover the surface of, and that's like you and Jess now. You don't just touch day-to-day things in your communication. You can talk about the deeper things. Because there's time.
There's time. Space, and you can do it at all different sorts of time during the day, right?
Yeah. And I said that to Kevin. I said, I wish we just had more time. I wish I had more time to like sit with my kids a little longer and work through things instead of actually just addressing them. And then I wish I had time to talk to him about the extras. Yeah. It's like you can clean your house, but when are you like actually dusting baseboards and blinds and all that? Like there's no time for those ones.
No, that happens once every year or every 5 years.
That's what I feel like in my connections when we are just like duty heavy. And we're out of town every weekend lately. We're just really front heavy in this season of hockey. And I'm hoping that come January, there's a little less out of town travel that will slow some of those things down. But that's what my routine looks like. And it is a finely greased wheel, a finely tuned wheel. But all of those things aren't necessarily what would be desired. They're desirable to make it all fit. And it's not unreasonable. It's not like my kids are in a million things. They're in one thing that has a million fucking tasks.
Yeah,
that's the problem.
That's the tough one. Hockey is really big that way.
Well, so that's been interesting. But then you start looking at like where do things, if you're, part of our routines, we've talked about gym memberships. We've talked about work and pulling back on work and changing work schedules. All these things impact our finances. And that's something we're going to talk about in a couple of weeks is how our health is impacted by our finances and stress over finances.
Oh, big time. That should be a good conversation to have because we haven't talked about that ever.
No. And when we're talking about routine and discipline and focus, I mean, really, that's one of the things at the forefront of all of that because what is our like security in our future? We're all working as hard as we're working right now so we can be secure in the future when we're not working. Yeah. Isn't that the goal?
That's generally the
plan. But
we're
making ourselves sick in the process.
Yeah. And some people aren't living long enough to enjoy that.
Yeah.
Interesting. So before we wrap up this episode, if you feel like you're in a rut, the best advice I think I could give is that's when you do the 20%, start mixing it up, or even make that more so, right? Like look at something you can do in your routine that you can just mix up a bit or just stop doing and pick maybe something that's more playful, more fun. Maybe go outside more. You know what I mean? Turn the phone off earlier in the day or the computer.
Don't pick up the phone in the morning if that's one of the things that holds you back and gets you in a rut. Don't sit down on the couch with the coffee. Go for the walk. Like, what are the things, right? Like I said, I miss walking my dog in the morning, and that was freedom that was taken away with too many kids to get out the door to do it, right? Or letting some of them sleep instead of, So what are the things that you can do to help you? Look outside of you. Does somebody else need a partner at the gym, or does a dog need walking? Does, like Griffin need a hand in the morning doing something, right? Like if you can't anchor into yourself for the motivation, hook on someone else, hitchhike on somebody else's need, because we are often more likely to help somebody else than we will ourselves.
Oh, big time.
And when we're stuck in a rut, we are letting ourselves down because we haven't prioritized what it was we had on our plate because we're prioritizing the other people's.
Yes.
Yeah. It's easier to let ourselves down. So your rut is you not prioritizing whatever it was you had set aside for yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there you go.
So go hitchhike on somebody else and get started.
I love that. Stick that thumb out and hook someone. That wraps up this episode. We're back next week with your next favorite episode of the Integrateness Podcast. Until then, I'm Jason.
I'm Jolene.
Talk to you soon.